I see it's 4:30. We have a quorum. I know that Alder Abbas is excused. Hopefully Rafiq will be joining us soon, but we can get going with the February 10th version of the Urban Design Commission. Before we get into our agenda, I'm going to invite our tech facilitator, Stefan, to provide some important instructions with regard to participating in the virtual meeting.
Right, thank you. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. The chair, clerk, and tech facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting commission members. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call vote, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Goodhart, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. First order of business is approval of minutes. Is there a motion for minutes approval? Jessica, is there a second? Craig? Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, then by unanimous consent, the January 27th minutes are approved. The next item is public comment. I know that we saw that there was one registrant for comment that was not on any agenda item. I don't know, Janine, if we've determined whether or not that request is to speak on an agenda item, because it said, what did it say? Neither support. What did it say?
It looks like she supports.
Supports. But was.
And she's not here. I don't know if that matters.
Well,
we can watch the attendees list, and if it does appear, we can bring that up at the end.
Right. And if it's with an agenda item, then she can speak at that time. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is disclosures and recusals. Does anybody have a disclosure or a recusal? No. Okay. Then Janine, if you wouldn't mind, please reviewing the agenda for today.
Thank you, Chair. Before I touch on the agenda, I just want to remind the public that if you have comments or questions about today's agenda or agenda items, you can email them to urbandesigncomments@cityofmadison.com. Please note that any comments that you email after 3 p.m. the day of the meeting may not be up on Legistar and may not be in front of the commission before that item is heard, but they will be available on Legistar for the public for future consideration. So just wanted to clarify that. With that, I will jump into the agenda. Of course, the first part of the agenda does have the meeting link and information, some of the information I just covered. We've already covered first part of the meeting. Under new business, we have one item under public hearing and 2 items under new business. Those are both informational presentations. Under the public hearing item, 622 and 624 West Washington Avenue, that is a signage exception. They're requesting final approval. There's a staff report in your packet, and staff does support this to be on the consent agenda. The applicant is here and available to answer questions if the commission prefers to keep it on the agenda. Under new business, the first informational presentation will be for 145, 151 West Wilson Street and 309 through 321 South Henry Street. This is a new mixed-use building in a UMX district. The UDC would be an approving body when this comes back to the commission, and the staff report outlines a little bit more about what UMX considerations would be put in place. This second informational presentation is 341 State Street, 315 through 319 West Gorham Street, 321 West Gorham Street, and 322 West Johnson Street. This is a new mixed building. And in the future, when it comes back, it's anticipated that it will be a planned development. And note that they're requesting height in excess of what is allowed through regular zoning. So that therein lies the PD zoning request. The staff report outlines some of these details a little bit further in the report. And this is the item where most of the public comments have been received. I believe we had 2 before 3 p.m. and then there's additional that we've received since. So that's all I have. Any questions from the chair?
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
Would there be a motion for approval of number 2 on the consent agenda? Or would you like to see it? Okay, so there's a motion by Craig, seconded by Jessica. Okay, seeing no other hands raised, then by unanimous consent, agenda item number 2, signage exception is approved. If you're in attendance for that, you can sit along and join us. Otherwise, you're free to go. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us already to item number 3, 145 through 151, West Wilson Street. I see one registrant wishing to speak.
That is correct. Kevin Burrow is here from the design team, and there are other folks that are available to answer questions, which includes Randy, Dave Diamond, Trina Sandschafer, and Bruce Bosman.
Kevin, you should be unmuted.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to present this project before you for informational review. This is the proposed redevelopment of the west end of the 100 block of West Wilson, as shown on the site exhibit in front of you. We also have our list of goals here listed out, but in light of time, we will move on to the overall design for this project. So the overall layout is taking down the existing rental housing buildings at the end of this block and putting up a 10-story mixed-use building that will contain approximately 207 apartment units, and we will have enclosed parking for approximately 230 to 240 vehicles within the building. We've created a unique shape to this building in order to try and maximize the views from this building out to the lake, and then also allowing views towards the Capitol as well. So you can see sort of our rather unique backwards 7 shape, which is the upper stories of the building. So floors 2 through 10 are that shape. And then the podium level contains the common entry lobby and some first floor parking. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's the overall massing in a perspective view. So again, we've got that masonry podium base, which would, the intention is to have it be a cast stone element down there. And then the 200 plus apartment tower goes on top of that. And we have generous outdoor amenity spaces located in 3 different locations. On both sides, at the top of the podium on the 2nd floor level, you can see the one shown here in front, which would contain an outdoor pool area, a gathering space, and even a solarium element, which feeds off of the library space within the building. And then the main upper roof, we are able to have a walking path up there and green roof elements. And we intend to do mechanical penthouse, solar panels, et cetera, on that roof. Next slide, please. The overall first floor layout is shown here, where you can see how the parking circulates in off of Wilson. We do also have parking access off of South Henry Street. And then the lobby is the main feature of this, where you come in off. We've intentionally pulled the building back off of the corner to provide better view corridor around the corner of Wilson, which is a one-way heading to the southwest, and then Henry Street as well. So we've got an outdoor gathering space available for the cafe space, which would be the commercial space within the building. And then we've provided ample bike parking on this level as well. Next slide, please. So we have 2 levels of underground parking. You can go to the next slide, which basically spirals down into the ground towards the back end of the site. Next slide. The main second floor level here contains all the common area amenity space along the southern side or the bottom of the page here, where we've got fitness area, the solarium library space, a couple of different gathering spaces within the building for community gathering in a couple different areas. And then on the northern side or upper portion of the page, we have an outdoor gathering space as well, which would have a grilling station and other amenities that residents would have access to. Next slide. The main floor levels are repetitive from 3rd through 10th, where it's a mixture of studios, 1s, and 2-bedroom apartments. The unique design of this affords us to have approximately 85% of our units have lake views, either directly from their unit or from their balconies, which are splayed outward from the building to provide wonderful vistas for almost every unit in the apartment. Next slide. And then the roof area has the walking path and the green roof areas and potential solar panel locations. Next slide. A schematic section so you can understand how the parking sequence works. We have 2 sublevels of parking that sort of corkscrew down, and then the first floor level is a taller space as well. We're able to slip in a small mezzanine level of parking, and then the apartments grow up from that. Next slide. So exterior elevations are shown here. Why don't we jump to the renderings? Next slide. So you can see the overall design of the building. It's predominantly a lot of glass and metal panel for the upper portions of the building, and then the cast stone base creates that podium level, and we are introducing quite a bit of windows along that base as well, both in the parking area and also along the front facade on Wilson Street. And it'll be a mixture of glass, bird glass is obviously going to be required now with the new ordinance, and then metal panel. The exact materials have yet to be determined. We're looking at doing a cast stone type material for the base. And then the railings are initially shown here as glass railings. They will either be glass or potentially a metal panel system as well. Next slide. So same view where you can just kind of clearly see the overall design of the building, how each of the balconies create that unique profile along both sides or all sides of the facade where they splay out so you have those great vistas towards the lake or towards the Capitol. Next slide. Here's a view looking back down Wilson Street so you can see that the detail carries around all sides of the building. Next slide. And then our final view, sort of a long vista view from the lake looking back towards the building. We are limited to 10 stories, so we're going to be in similar height to the adjacent properties next to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments, Rafiq?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. I don't know. I always say this. I don't think that every building in Madison needs to have a masonry component. I don't think the brick helps this design, but it's neither here nor there. It's a podium, so I don't think that's a huge distractor. I actually like the concept that you're going for. What I don't like, and it is really bothering me, on this image right here, are those sawtooth 4 balconies. I think they're too close to be that shape. They could just be orthogonal to the building. I understand the rest of them because they're spaced out, but when you have those 4 like that, it doesn't seem like it's working very well for such a flat face of the building. And then on the last view that you had, the last rendering image elevation, that face compared to the building next to it seems flat. And I was wondering if it's any way that you can kind of give it some type of depth or dimension, kind of like the other building has. I don't know if that's pushing that center spine in a little bit or just making it not so flat compared to the context next to it. But yeah, those are my only comments. I think it's a pretty good job minus those kind of sawtooth balconies that's just hanging off of a flat surface. So
your comment, just to clarify, your comment with regard to the balconies was was the ones that are on Wilson Street only then, right?
Right. I like the triangular ones for the ones that are spaced out, but when they're so close together, it's kind of like,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Jessica?
Yeah. I'll actually disagree with Rafiq on those balconies, but because what I am liking is that when you move around that building, it has stuff that sticks out, which hardly any other building does in Madison. So I would debate with Rafiq on that one. I'm curious about how much glazing there is for residents. And I'm wondering, especially the side that's facing south, if that will, plus it's, coming off the lake, if that will be potentially very bright, and if the facade might end up looking like a lot of curtains in varying states of closed, which is not attractive. Is there a reasoning behind so much glazing?
It is a desire to try and maximize the amount of views we have. We do appreciate your comment with regards to the potential for the curtains or the scattered look there. We do intend to provide roller shades so that there'll be a consistent appearance with those as far as uniformity. We haven't determined the opaqueness of them, but chances are that will help balance out any sort of a random or haphazard look to any of the curtain type elements that could potentially exist, like with blinds that could be in partial states of open or closed and things like that.
Right. And I just had one more question about it says dog run on the top floor, and I was wondering what kind of protection is up there for running dogs.
Yeah, it is our intention to utilize that green roof area in the middle for residents to be able to take their dogs up to relieve themselves up there. So that'll be more of a synthetic turf area located towards the center. Obviously, there's no concern about any fall or anything like that, but it's just providing that amenity up on the uppermost floor.
Is there some kind of parapet that would keep dogs from running, possibly jumping over?
Yeah, no, we will definitely have a railing system, guardrails, or a parapet. We haven't gotten to that level of detail to determine the roof walking surface elevation compared to the parapet, but yes, there will definitely be safety railings installed.
So if there are safety railings, they're not right up on the edge of the building. They probably won't be visible from the street.
Correct. We would hold them back inward so they wouldn't become an apparent element to the facade.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lois, and then Shane.
Thank you. I agree with Rafiq. I love I think it's a handsome building. I do like the rhythm that the balconies on the sides of the building create, and I think that'll be really dynamic with shadows and everything. I think on Wilson Street, I think it's all lost. It looks a little like a sawtooth, flimsy little line. I'm not sure if it's functional either, if it's increasing any kind of views that would warrant this kind of treatment. So I will repeat, I guess, Rafiq's concern about that. And then also, I think I just, as you develop the design in the landscaping in particular, is to pay close attention to that. Is it Henry that's going down the hill there? Yes. Just so it feels welcoming for a pedestrian, because right now, obviously, it's just parking garage. And so I think I just would like some detail that will help soften that. And then I'll also I agree about the amount of glass, and to be, I know Mecco shades and shading devices. Sometimes, I work downtown in an upper level building, and when you look over at other, residential places, the shades are down all the time because for privacy from other buildings. And so I think just do maybe just examine the views around and see where the likely use of those MECO shades is going to probably be used more than not.
Okay.
But other than that, I think it's a nicely designed building.
Thank you.
Okay. Shane?
Hey, thanks. I really like the concept. I think it's a clever shape to maximize those views, so I appreciate that. I also like the amount of rooftop terrace and green space you're showing. It's really exciting to see that coming up, especially in this kind of area and quantity on these larger projects. I would look for in the future, not that it's just a CEDAM map necessarily. I think the opportunity is there to do at least a semi-intensive profile to get a little bit more plant diversity and interest in that. Obviously, besides the dog run area. And then on Wilson Street, I think that street could really use some relief in the building massing and activation like you're showing. So I think that's great and exciting. I wonder if it could kind of wrap that corner just slightly because of the sun exposure. It is kind of on the, north side of the building there or northwest. And by wrapping that corner, you might pick up some space where there's more light. But I do like how you're using the planters to, again, provide some visual interest, some shadow and relief as you move down that hill in this view. I forget what that street is. And then finally, I think the solarium is kind of an interesting piece too, and that's another exciting thing to see. So mostly just compliments. I like the direction you're headed.
Thank you, Shane.
Okay. Russell?
Thank you. I'll just echo a lot of the comments. The building massing, the form, I really like. I like the simplicity of the materials and the color palette. I think the sawtooth balconies help make that a little more exciting, but still keeps a pretty simple and elegant appearance. I'm wondering about the glass myself and the amount of glass, and a couple of thoughts. One is, it seems like you've created a really wonderful opportunity for the views to come from and through the balcony with the glass railings that you're carrying right now in the design. That an opening through the balcony and out the balcony. I just looking at the floor plan, it does look like that's kind of a bedroom area with maybe a corner of a living space that would be adjacent to those balconies. I'm just wondering if you really invested in the glass there, you would have potentially both views and but protected somewhat from some of the harsher elements of the sun. So I'd just be curious if you guys have looked at that, or maybe you could look at that, and then with if that's not an opportunity with the amount of glass you're currently showing, did you evaluate curtain wall as a cost-effective but high-performing way to get this much glass on this building? It does look like you potentially lose the depth of the maybe metal panel that breaks up the glass at each floor, but I'm just wondering if you guys have evaluated that.
We're looking at a few different systems right now. We haven't really locked in on any one specifically, but we do like the texture that the window wall system that we're showing right now does provide us. Yeah. Being able to accentuate the floor bands. But yeah, we can take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, so I think next time I'd love to see what it really looks like, maybe the experience from looking from inside out the balcony, and just if that really accomplishes a lot of the goals I mean, I love the vision of this, and I understand the intent. I just wonder if you can accomplish it now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We certainly can provide additional views.
Okay. Craig?
Thanks, Cliff. So I won't repeat what others said, just to few more lines. But Kevin, I think for the next step, a couple items I do see, just given where we are with adjacent buildings, I think a solar shadow study would be helpful for us to see. The electric vehicle parking, I think, is a great bonus that you have there. For this site, obviously, because it's so tight, I think making sure some of the details of the utilities. I see that MG&E vault you have. How that's going to be vented, et cetera, will be impactful on a tight site. And then, is there anything else planned outside of the mechanical penthouse or that MG&E vault you have, or are you trying to maintain everything within the footprint for the other utilities?
A lot of them will be located within the basement. We know we have to add a generator room and those types of things, which we intend to utilize some of the corners of the basement areas that you cannot get a vehicle or into. So there will be additional mechanical space scattered in the lower levels, but air handling systems, water, and things like that will be up on the main roof element in the penthouse.
Okay. One item just that you're there, because I think you can make the most desirable location for a maintenance person ever to want to work is at the penthouse. It looks like you have a freight elevator that if you made a double door where the freight elevator access mechanical penthouse, and just looking at that doored mechanical penthouse for the Wisconsin winters, that nobody has to walk outside, especially right now, you could become the best friends of the maintenance guy that's going to work there.
Good point.
The other item, a couple discussions about the roller shades. I know one item, and I'm sure you'll consider this, is just the exterior color of it based on the glazing that you select to just minimize the visibility of those shades, as kind of talked about before, which is typically a consideration. The railing details at the roof, I know they're hidden from below, but given the density here, they will be visible from other locations too. So just looking at those railing details, make sure that's thought out. And I believe that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig.
Thanks, Craig. I would direct the commission's attention to the staff report, and there was some mention of the downtown, the downtown urban design guidelines, and for us to review the building's relationship to the sidewalk. I think that this is an informational presentation and a perfect time for us to give some direction or comment to the designers with regard to the big, huge parking podium that most pedestrians are going to experience. So at the very least, I think when you come back for an approval, I would really like to see a lot closer detail of that Henry Street experience, because I can see a tiny little figure there, and their head is very close to the bottom of the planter there, and it just gets higher and higher. That's a big parking garage with frosted glass. So I think that got to really look at giving something back to the neighborhood down along Henry Street. I know it's really tight, and the way the parking's working, there's not much opportunity for apartments or any kind of building entrances there, but we have to think really creatively about doing something with the landscape and the facade there. I would also encourage you to consider some of that glass along John Nolan Drive, because the renderings that we see, it's sort of disguised with trees, but a lot of times during the year there's no leaves in the trees. Yeah, there. Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Cliff, you hit the one issue. I was concerned about the Henry Street facade and the pedestrian experience. That was just wanted to reemphasize that. And the other thing also mentioned before, I guess, on Wilson Street, I don't love the sawtooth. I do like the idea of dimensionality and projection there, but I think perhaps a different design. And maybe that design carries around on the John Nolan side too, where you've got, as Rafiq pointed out, you've got a very, very flat surface. Maybe there's something that echoes the two ends of the building in certain terms of some dimensionality, but not necessarily sawtooth. So that's all I had.
Okay. Any other comments? This is informational, and this is the perfect time to express your feelings. And I know we've got a lot of good informational comments this afternoon. If there's any other questions for the developer or the designers. Okay. I don't see any, so thank you very much. Really exciting project on a really visible site. We wish you good luck and look forward to seeing you again. Okay, so here we are already to our last agenda item. This one is 341 State Street, Gorham Street, Johnson Street. This is an informational presentation as well.
The team members registered to speak for this item include Brian Munson and Jeff Zalisco. Another person not wanting to speak but available for questions is Mark Gohausen.
Okay. So, Brian, if you're going to kick off, otherwise, Jeff, either one, by all means.
Well, thanks, Cliff. I will lead things off, and as we pivot to from one really visible site to another, we're excited to be here tonight. Much more early in the process than the previous applicant, to talk about a exciting redevelopment project that we are at the front end of. We are, of course, bound by Johnson, Broome, Gorham, and State. This is an area that has a lot of planning recommendations on it for increased density as well as vibrancy within the context of the State Street and the downtown area. And so as we've worked through this concept tonight, we can share some new advances in thinking in how the massing starts to work, but we're really interested in feedback about the overall program. This project anticipates creating roughly 1,100 beds split between 404 student apartments and then approximately 77 affordable, most likely student affordable housing units within the project distributed throughout, and we'll touch on that. We do see this as a great opportunity for a mixed-use building with vibrant retail along the frontage, not just on State Street, but embracing Gorham and Johnson with additional up to about 2,300 square feet of retail. In terms of the context, you can see this photo is a really good example of what led to the city's discussion of the step backs that really inform the design. But also you can see the context of the approvals around us, ranging from 12 stories at Ovation, immediately across the street on Johnson, to some of the larger buildings further up Johnson and Gorham, but then also importantly, stepping the other direction down to State Street. If you could go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Here you can see the existing conditions. So again, we span from State Street to Broome along Gorham and then along a large portion of the block on Johnson. Some of the existing buildings on State Street, in fact, a majority of the frontage will remain, along with the fire station at the corner of Broome and Johnson. So as I said, the step backs and changes in height are really kind of form determinants for this project, which go from 4 stories on State Street, step back 40 feet. You're then allowed to come up to 6 stories, step back an additional amount, totaling 130 feet from State Street, and then you can step up to 8. We are requesting bonus height for this beyond the approval. And as Janine included in the map, I think a good example is the Ovation right across the street. Originally was identified for 8 stories. Of course, has a 12-story element. What we are proposing as kind of our justifications for that height really are our points 1 and 2 apply in this case. We believe that, as I mentioned, the compatibility with the adjoining buildings is a component of that. And in fact, when we get to our final overall floor heights and building heights, I think you'll see that this trends closer in comparison to the 8-story section of Ovation across the street than the 12-story or even a full 10 stories. Because when you look at Ovation, had 2 stories of office and retail on the first couple floors, whereas this will be a mixed-use building with retail and residential above. In terms of the higher quality building components, as I mentioned, really a key component of this is that trade-off for affordable housing. This is a project that's not seeking TIF or tax credit assistance, but is asking for the bonus floors as a way to facilitate the incorporation of that affordable housing spread throughout the building. But beyond that, as you look at the model tonight, you'll see significant step backs and insets throughout the building to create a rhythm and spacing of this building, to create opportunities for different expressions and to create an overall building that fits within the rhythm of State Street and beyond. Speaking of State Street, we are proposing to actually lower the frontage on State Street. So instead of going up to the 4-story cap, we felt, given the context around us on the State Street frontage, the 3-story elements would be more appropriate. And so we are seeking to shift some of that square footage up higher. And then finally, we are working through an exploration of the green building standards, the NGBS standards, to incorporate sustainability and energy efficiency throughout the building, and something that we're excited to do. So again, we're at the very front end, so we really appreciate any comments you'd have on the programming. And so with that, I will shift over to Jeff to talk about the design as it sits today.
Thank you, Brian. Janine, could you go to page 10, please? In the interest of brevity, I'm going to touch on specific sheets, and we can always go back to other ones if that's a necessary thing. Thank you. So, it's a large site, and there's some context of it, in particular along State Street, that's a much smaller scale. So we see this, and we're showing these images, these inspiration images, because we see a real opportunity here to have this read as a collection of buildings, of elegant buildings that are appropriate in scale around the portions of the site on the 4 sides of the block. So that's why we're showing this, because we see this as a possibility, this collection to read really like what you see along State Street and around the surrounding sites. Next page, please. So we have significant retail along Gorham and State Street, same on Johnson. We also have a large amenity, a large residential lobby. Think of it like a boutique hotel lobby where there's a lot of activity. So those things are happening around the site. One thing that you are seeing that's different here is that there's no longer, the package we originally submitted had a lobby for affordable/workforce housing. That no longer exists because the affordable housing is now spread, as Brian mentioned, throughout the building. So we're going about that in a different way based on feedback we really received from a lot of people within the city on this subject. Janine, can you go to page 13, please? This is a typical floor within the residential portions of the building. And important points I want to make here is you see the purple blocks you see represent the affordable units that are scattered within in strategic locations based on different size, 1-bedroom studios, 2 bedrooms, that sort of thing. The other thing I just want to make a point on is that you see a lot of articulation. This is designed specifically into the building to reinforce this idea of this series of buildings. So as we get to massing models we prepared, you'll see further on why we went about this. But this is another thing that we built into the building at the expense probably of efficiency, but to provide this articulation. Please go to page 15. So we have the setbacks Brian mentioned earlier, 4 floors for the first 30 feet from State Street, and then 6 floors back to 130 feet from State Street. And this, where you see this diagonal line with the blue, so that's that 132 feet foot setback from State Street. So this gives you an idea of how that's working, how we set that back, and that's a significant distance. And but we are meeting the underlying zoning requirements for all of those setbacks. Next page, or I'm sorry, go to page 15. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did 15. Let's go to page 20. So this is a view looking south along State and Gorham, and Brian had mentioned the 3 stories. So it is our intent to provide 3 stories because of the scale. It's 3 stories along State Street and wrapping around Gorham because of the scale of the existing buildings on this street. Really having the 9th and 10th floors allows us the opportunity to lower the building along there where it really matters along State Street. And I think also from this, you see that it's almost impossible to see the 10 story levels set back 131 feet anywhere from State Street and really along really any of this path that you see here. Also, this was an idea that came from Bob Kleba during a Canada neighborhood meeting regarding the 3 floors, and we took it seriously. We think it was a really good idea, and that is something we want to incorporate into the building. Next page, please, Jenny. So this is looking west along State Street and southwest along Johnson. On this slide, I just wanted to reinforce what Brian was mentioning about the height of the other buildings. We really are lower than surrounding buildings, even with those additional floors. And again, you see the setback is so significant, the 131 feet from State Street as this building steps back. I mean, we think the form-based zoning that's been developed in Madison works great, and this building is another example of that. Next page, please. And then this is looking northwest along Broome and Johnson. I think this image really shows this articulation that we provided, how this gives us an opportunity to do something really wonderful and have this read as a series of buildings articulated differently. These are things we're just starting to delve into, but we really think with this massing, and we're always concerned about showing massing models in something like this, but we felt like this massing model really reinforces the idea that we're proposing with this, series of buildings with these significant, these aren't token setbacks, they're real setbacks in the building, and they really make a big difference considering the scale and whatnot in the building. One other thing I wanted to mention here is that we're pursuing a sustainable rating system for this building, and the system that we're going to use is the National Green Building Standards. It's NGBS. This is the national, sustainable rating system. It's the only one that's actually approved by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. So we wanted to make sure that it's understood that this is something we've been asked about, and it is something that we are actively pursuing and planning on building into this building. So thank you very much for listening to us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback and comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay, I can start. We had a pretty lengthy staff report from Janine, and it spelled out a number of things that are going to be important for us to be making findings on ultimately, and not the least of which is the request to exceed the downtown height map limitations by 2 stories. And so, as Janine pointed out there, or she included the language in the code where the excess height has to meet 4 conditions, and also where the plan development standards talk about where, or I guess the criteria for rezoning to a plan development. So just in case you don't have that up there, the excess height needs to be compatible with existing and planned character of the surrounding area, and has to allow for demonstrated higher quality architecture than could be achieved without. So I think we're going to have to make sure that the applicant reminds us how this will work with the existing context and the planned character of the neighborhood, and also the demonstration of higher quality design that could be achieved with an 8-story building, because the PD standards does not allow a rezoning just specifically for the purpose of increasing density. And I know right now that the property is in 2 different zoning districts, UMX and downtown core, but an 8-story building could be rezoned downtown core. The request for the additional 2 stories is the only that I can see the only reason why they need to go to 10 stories. They're trying to make a case that we need to consider and listen to, that affordable units factor into our decision to recommend additional heights. Okay, let's see, Rafiq and then Lois.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's so early on in the project that it's hard to give like some, I guess, substantial comments. But I hate step backs. I think that big buildings are going to be big buildings no matter how far you step it back or how many times you do it. But I do think that from this massing, I think it's done fairly well to where it creates some interesting architectural opportunities. And I'll say opportunities because I don't know what you're going to do with it yet. But I think it creates some pretty cool architectural opportunities and design decisions or abilities for design decisions that could potentially qualify this for that heightened whatever that you need for the agreement or whatever it's called, the allowance. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Lois, and then Craig.
Yeah, I think I'm a little troubled by the geometry, especially where you've created that courtyard. It feels like all the apartments that are going to be around that courtyard are kind of going to feel like second-class citizens in a way. I feel like it's, I don't know. I don't think those are going to be very attractive units looking down. And it's a canyon. I mean, it's a pretty deep courtyard that you've created there, and it doesn't look that large. So the geometries you created to make one building, maybe that's what's bothering me. I'm trying to figure out how you're going to trick this into not looking like one huge mass, because I think there's a desire in the neighborhood for to have a little bit of variety as you walk around this building, and that's going to be a very big challenge. And then the other thing that as we add buildings around this kind of towards the end of Gorman Johnson before they make their turns, is it's starting to become really canyon-like there. And you don't get a sense of scale of anything, because as you drive through, it's just a wall of buildings. And some buildings have addressed that better than others. And so I think you're going to have to be creative on how to pull that back and have a lightness to that pedestrian and even vehicular experience as you come by, so you just don't feel like you're again in a canyon. So I think those are some pretty big challenges. But right now looks like one big mass, and I agree with Rafiq. I think there's going to be it'll be interesting to see how you define these different massings or the pieces of it.
Okay, thank you. Craig?
Yeah, and just to build upon that, because I think Cliff, you kind of, and there was a little bit of hesitation. I think we were all didn't want to go first, so I appreciate you going first, breaking the ice. But I think what Janine lays out in that memo, and some of the criteria is what additional what additional features or architecture are you doing to put this above and beyond a building that doesn't have those additional stories? And given the location and prominence of this project, there's a certain expectation of what the project shall be, from the baseline. So I think what we'd be looking for is what the demonstrated above and beyond is to justify those additional stories. And given the profile of this building, that needs to be explicitly demonstrated too when you come back. As Rafiq and Lois said, very unique geometry layout opportunities. So given what the baseline would be, it's what's done above and beyond to give that to justification is typically, especially in something like this, a pretty high hurdle. So just want to make sure that's clearly when you come back, it's clearly demonstrated.
Right, and I think I heard Brian or Jeff say they would, for example, instead of going all the way to 4 stories on State Street, like the map allows, maybe keep that down to 3. That's predominantly 2 and 3 story buildings on that block. So that, that potentially could be something they're giving back there to make State Street less canyon-like, but bringing that height somewhere else. Those are the kind of things I think we really want to see what we're getting back. Where are we getting, maybe pushing the building away from the sidewalk along Johnson or Gorham for some enhanced outdoor dining instead of people just being right on the sidewalk at the property line. What are we getting back as a community that we will see and enjoy and experience? Because we don't know 10 years from now what the rents are going to be and what affordable really means. Rafiq and then Tom.
Yeah, I was thinking about Lois's comment, and I think that if there's a way to move that, I'm going to call it a finger because I don't know what else to call it, but that middle piece of the angled space, right there where that tree is, or what it looks like where the tree is. Yeah, we can get rid of that. I think it'll let a lot more light and views into that canyon. I don't want to call it a canyon. Buildings are going to be tall, so I don't want to call them canyons, but into that courtyard type space, and it might make those units a lot more appealing and offer some better architecture. But yeah, or even if it slides out a little bit, I feel like it's just too narrow, and I think that's what Lois was getting at. Like you're looking out of your wall into somebody else's wall.
Okay. Tom.
Yeah, I sort of building on comments that have been made. My reaction is in attempting to break up the mass and make it look like multiple buildings, you could move towards a jumbled appearance. How the architecture of this plays out will be very challenging to make this look decent. You've got facets of angles meeting squares and the cutouts, etc. It's a very complicated geometry. And going back to Rafiq's earliest questions, maybe sometimes a big building should just look like a big building and not all chopped up and cut out and set back and whatever. So how you deal with this architecture is going to be, I think, exceedingly challenging to make this mass not look jumbled and maybe, I know you're trying to make it not look like one big building, but at least components of it probably need to stand alone in some way and yet relate to each other. I think it's a very architecturally challenging geometry that you've proposed, and I don't know how to react to it because we don't have the architecture yet, but I'm just saying I think it's going to be very difficult to resolve well.
Thank you. Jessica, and then Shane.
I've heard multiple times people have mentioned that this is broken up to try and not look like such a massive building. So I think it might be appropriate to ask, why is it one building with a site that big? You have to work so hard to make it look like not one building. And then I'd be curious too about shadows being cast in that courtyard and also onto State Street, even though it has a step back. The southern sun is, hitting this facade we're looking at right now. And what would happen to State Street, I'd be curious to know about. Also, when it has such a big footprint, it's a little hard to understand where all the exits would be and where people are moving around the base of this building, inside and outside. So it'd be curious to see that. I would be curious. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Shane.
Thanks. A lot of my notes have already been covered, but I want to restate or reiterate, I think the move to go to 3-story on State Street is a good move and does have me seriously, considering the trade-offs and the benefits of that. So that is definitely something I like. The other sort of main thing that we really haven't talked about yet, and if to make an informed decision on this in the future, the information I would like to know is about the existing buildings and what you're proposing to remove for this project. I'm sure not all of them are in great condition, but knowing whether they have any sort of status, it seemed like from some of the public comments that they did not. But there's some really wonderful articulation in some of the smaller storefronts, specifically on Gorham, but even some of the stuff on Johnson too. I walked Johnson recently, I think when the weather was nice last year, and despite all the traffic moving through it, it's kind of a nice streetscape, and you have a lot of nice trees and stuff along that edge. So I know State Street is oftentimes the focus of the pedestrian scale conversation, but Johnson Street has, and Gorham Street, they have that same vibe. They're right there connected to State Street. They want to have active little storefronts with shops and people and activity and light spilling out of them. So I think my concern is that we're removing some charming small buildings in the name of progress. And I want to know a little bit more about those structures we're proposing to take down. And just re-emphasize that pedestrian scale. I agree, it doesn't have to necessarily be in setbacks or depressed forms along the street edge, because I think there's places in our city where there is a tall building right next to and other cities for that matter, where there is a tall facade right next to the street, but there's other things that are activating it that make it a wonderful place to be. Thanks.
Thank you. Craig?
Just to build, I think what Jessica has talked about too, and some of their comments from Rafiq and Lois is, if it's going to be a big building and a big mass, and as Jessica said, you're going to have additional challenges even with the recesses that, maybe it is worth making some separation so you aren't constrained to these long elevations or working around corners and view sheds. That would provide you more opportunities. And, one thing we talk about quite a bit is the simplicity of larger buildings. And I think by this form, while there's lots of opportunities there, and I'm not saying or saying it can't be done this way, but with the longer elevations and working around the corners, I think there is just an inherent challenge of how you make it all work together without, if you are trying to make it look separate or or broken up, it's still a large building no matter what. So if that's the case, then I think there's other items you can, or ways you can approach it, whether it is separating as it vertically moves away from the podium, so that you could give some other distinction to it. Otherwise, you are going to be locked in or having a hard time as you want to change materials or designs and working around corners. That, again, it's just going to be challenging of working through that.
Okay, let's see. Shane, you had another comment? Hold on.
Remembered one.
There you go. Okay.
There we go. One other small request. I think it would be helpful to see the cross section through State Street and how it compares to the hub cross section. I know you showed that in part of your presentation is imagery, but that's a space we can visualize, and just how this cross section compares to something like the hub just down State Street. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Russell.
Yeah, I was going to make an attempt to give some feedback on one part of the presentation that I think you didn't spend much time on, but that is here, and that's the sort of design precedents or some of the examples that maybe has your team inspired. And I find all the precedents pretty. There's a broad spectrum of different types of buildings there, and there's one page before this as well, Janine, that are frankly they're quite different between the two pages, and didn't get a chance to hear what you were thinking, but I suppose what we would want to see later is some context with the. Obviously, we want to hear where you might be going with this, but some context with the other buildings around it. My sense is that it's mostly masonry type buildings around there from just my memory. So really, maybe the second page, not this page, but the following page of the presentation might be an aesthetic that's closer to sort of matching the context of that area. So that's just my trying to give you a little feedback on that part of the slide here. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for either Jeff or Brian. Janine, if you could go to the first floor plan. Yeah, right there. I'm just wondering if you would consider or have considered bringing the residential lobby to Johnson Street and bring retail over to Gorham. As Shane mentioned, Johnson has a nice streetscape, and there's already a number of apartment buildings along Johnson Street, whereas where you're showing the residential lobby right now is basically across the street from Riley's liquor store and a lot closer to State Street, where I would think retail might be more viable. Also, the residences, of course, exiting on Johnson Street would be that much closer to the grocery store that's a block away. So I just wondered if you could speak to that planning decision.
Yeah, I could take that, Cliff. Really, the location of the lobby, we need a certain size and a certain depth, so there's something to the shape of that. Also, the core team felt strongly that it was important that the lobby be as close as possible towards campus, so that puts it at that corner. So that was the reasoning behind that.
Okay.
Cliff, there's a couple things, just we had a lot of comments. There was a few things I'd like to touch on, if that's okay, just in response or maybe just some additional feedback. One thing I wanted to point out, and you can see it here, that we have set back the building from the property line. So we have 15-foot sidewalks on Gorham, Broome, and Johnson. State Street's already 20 feet, but we're set back. I think that's a requirement that will come sometime in the future. It's not here yet, but we have enlarged all of those sidewalks at the detriment of the footprint of the building. So that is something where we have already set that We will definitely provide shadow studies. I think you will find that 132 feet from State Street will have a huge impact on the shadows that are cast that way. I think that is totally why the form-based code is like that, so that there is not so much shadow cast towards the street there. I did want to really reinforce that the third floor, having 3 floors, and we did this at the hub, and we have articulation on hub of varying from 4 to 2 floors. Same thing, we gave up area there, and we thought that that was very effective with the retail components we had. So the 3 floors is definitely where it's a trade of area. We feel that where it's 10 floors, and we also have those floors that are 9 and 10 floors. We have setbacks on almost all of those elements. So that is kind of a trade, taking the area down where it's really more important to take it down and putting it in a place where there's still setbacks, where we feel where it really doesn't have much of an impact compared to 8 floors or 10 floors. So we thought that that was really important. The courtyard, these buildings, we do these buildings around the country, and the courtyards are very common in this sort of a building, and they're common in Madison also. And I know it feels like the courtyards may be a penalty box, but they actually rent up very well. And there's a lot of reflective light in those courtyards. And some people like, at the lower levels, there's intimate and spaces where people have terraces and things. So they do rent very well, and they do fine. So it's not something that ends up sitting there empty. The last thing I wanted to mention is the views here. I mentioned that they're dangerous to show massing studies aerial views, but we really wanted you to be able to see the articulations that's built into this. And obviously that's area that's given up. And you'll never see these views from us again. You're now going to start seeing street views, the real views that you see the building from, and all of the points that you brought up about the shapes and how we make this work. I think you'll be incredibly pleasantly happy with what you see as we start to develop that. And it's not going to be weirdly different from one element to the next. There's going to be a continuousness that runs through it. But we're doing this just so you see that there's a huge effort made to really create this articulation in it and to break down the mass. And it's important. If these were just straight runs, it would be a big difference compared to what's being proposed. So I know at this point it's, we have to, prove it and show you that, but we feel strongly that when you start to see these in rendering views from the street and from different viewpoints, it will have a whole different feel and character to it from what you're seeing with this. Thank you for letting me throw in a little bit there. I thought it was important just to touch on some of those, and they were good points. But I thought it is
important, especially where you point out where you are. The subtle things like increasing the setback on the sidewalk. I think, dining sidewalk activity in the warmer months, especially on those busy streets, will benefit from a little relief from, being right on the curb. And anything else you can do to demonstrate what we as a city is getting back in return for those 2 stories is going to go a long way, I think, to having the commission go along with it. So thanks for explaining that. The last thing we want, looking at this view, is for the building to look like, you designed a building and then took a laser cutter, to shave off the areas where the setbacks and stepbacks were required. So I know that this is just massing, and we do look forward to seeing how that design and articulation gets expressed.
Right.
Are there any other comments or questions continuing this dialogue? Because this is informational, and this is really the best time to do that. Christian.
I had a lot of the same comments and concerns of the other commissioners, but just a couple things I would like to point out is the retail areas, especially on State Street and Gorham. I think it's going to be really important to design those in a way that State Street is full of a lot of different types of storefronts and architecture, but I think you need to really, put some effort into having those storefronts down on ground level retain some kind of character of what's up and down the street. Shane was commenting on, some of the nice storefronts that we're going to lose there. I'm thinking particularly of the community pharmacy and the bookstore next to it, which, frankly, I was surprised that there isn't been more comment from the public about historical or landmark status when I think of some of the things that have been brought before the city and before our commission about historical or architectural landmark bona fides are pretty meager compared to, I know, the history of these buildings and stuff. But aside from that, they just have a little bit of character that is obviously, if this goes forward, is going to disappear. But I hope some real effort is made into putting something back in its place that kind of speaks to the history and design of the area. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is I've always really admired the old firehouse building on the corner, which I think has since been converted into office space. But I'm feeling sad for them on all these designs that this project is looks to me like it's butting right up tight against them. And I would encourage you to also put some effort into giving that nice building a little room to breathe. I think it's deserving of that. That's all I have.
Okay.
Chair, do you mind if staff adds a quick comment about process? I'm going to wait for you to say yes.
I'm sorry, Janine, I was muted. Yeah, is it you or Kevin?
It's me.
Okay,
just
go
real
ahead.
Quick. And Kevin can jump in if he needs to. To Christian's comment about losing some of the existing buildings in public comment. Some of the late comments that we've received may speak to that topic. So I encourage the commission to go back into Legistar and check those public comments, because some of them might not be posted till later and some were posted late. So that's one thing. And secondly, this will go before the Landmarks Commission, not necessarily because there are historic buildings, but because there is a demo request. So there will be a public forum for people to speak about the removal of some of those buildings. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other parting shots? We want to give them all the feedback that we can before they start really getting deep into the design. Tom.
Yeah, just a quick question or clarification. The retail space is shown as one large block, but I'm assuming the intent is to break that up into smaller pieces based on tenant requirements.
Correct.
Okay. Again, keeping with the size and scale of things on retail on State Street, something that big just would end up being a national chain or something. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Russell.
One thing I don't believe we addressed, but just want to submit my encouragement to the team about the pursuit of the sustainability certification. I do understand that is a third-party certification. This committee may not really have much purview there, but I would just encourage you to continue that process. I don't know that it's going to necessarily apply or help to alleviate some of the other challenges that were mentioned, but just a nod of encouragement. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. So I guess that does it. Brian and Jeff, thank you very much. We look forward to speaking with you again in the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the comments. We appreciate it.
Okay. So let's see. Business by members. Any business by members? I see. Janine, you also had secretary's report on the bottom of the agenda. Is that something that you have something to report?
Correct. I want to just give an update about some items we'll cover at the next meeting, but we can cover business by members before we get there. And just a reminder, if it's not on the agenda, technically we are not to discuss the topic. Thank you.
Okay. Tom.
This is a really important matter. I charmed a group of Cub Scouts last night for about 30 minutes with a report on the Urban Design Commission, what we did and how we operated, and they loved it. Honest to God, they actually responded. So if anyone is presenting to Cub Scouts, I have a nice PowerPoint.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Jessica.
Hi.
What's that? How about now?
Okay. Yeah, I presented to Madison College students. I showed them these two projects and they're full of opinions. If anybody, we spent a good hour today talking about the UDC and its responsibility. I also want to give a shout out to Rafiq. I don't know if you know this, Rafiq, but your promotion totally publicized.
Oh.
Nice.
I'm sorry, I'm out of the loop on that. What?
Tell us.
Can fill us in?
He's the grand magician over at JLA.
Nice.
I'll let you say what exactly it is.
I was promoted to Director of Team Development and Vice President at JLA.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Not to mention all the other things that he does outside of that and outside of UDC.
Right.
He deserves some kudos.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we need one star in the group. Okay, and I do have one comment or one item to bring up. I have been in discussion with the staff about at some point in the future having a discussion with the commission with regard to the things that we can encourage, the things that we can enforce, the things that we can require with regard to environmental sustainability. I know that there's been some confusion on that and some advocacy, and that's really good. And at some point, we just want to make sure that we understand what it is that is in our power to require and what is in our power to suggest and recommend. So that'll be forthcoming, and that'll be posted on the agenda so that we'll have time to kind of put our thoughts together for that discussion. Okay. Let's see, Christian.
Yeah, because at this time we often talk about updates on projects. I wonder if Janine could comment, and if this is inappropriate, just tell me so. But I was curious about the project that came before us a year or so ago. Multiple times the apartment complex that was on the corner of, I believe, Bedford and West Washington, and nothing happened with it after we had, I think, given it final approval. And then recently I saw it got repurposed as a hardware store, and I just wondered what happened with that project. I mean, I assume it was some type of financial thing, and maybe we're not supposed to talk about that, but just out of curiosity, it was a project that came before us multiple times, and we spent a considerable amount of time discussing various aspects of it.
Looks like Kevin's ready to speak to it.
Yeah, unless Janine, I'm sorry, I was going to jump in just in case. Well, if you please add anything. That request that this commission saw, there was a bonus height component that was before you a couple of years ago, as Christian had mentioned. That request isn't going forward. We do have an application that's before the city's plan commission for a drive-through. There's an existing drive-through in that building, and the hardware store is seeking reapproval to use that drive-through again since the previous approval expired. So it's not the larger redevelopment that this body saw. It's more or less a reusing of what's on the site right now, and that's before the plan commission coming up at one of their future meetings.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay. Anything else before Janine offers her report? Okay. Go right ahead, Janine.
Thank you, Chair. At the next meeting, under the business by members, you'll see the Planning Division annual report for 2020, the year that almost wasn't. So we'll just talk about projects that we reviewed and different things that our planning colleagues worked on over the last year. Additionally, if we can, get some clarity, just based on staff time availability with John Strange and of course Kevin and other planning members. We'll try to get some clarification on UDC authority for sustainability. I don't know that that'll be on the February 24th, but hopefully definitely by March 10th. So that's a heads up on that. And last and certainly not least, I have some homework for everybody. And we'll be sending some information for you to ponder. We're working on a 2021 virtual bus tour. So we're looking at projects that have happened since our last in-person bus tour that we might be able to add to this. And of course, also looking for some creative ideas. I mean, we've got Julie, who's uber creative and can come up with some great ideas for how we can do this. But we'll be looking for what projects you want to see so we can start to plan the route for this. So again, we'll send a list of projects that the UDC and Plan Commission have reviewed over the last couple of years, and then we'll ask for your input on what you'd like to see. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. It's 5:52, and unless there's any other discussion by unanimous consent, we're adjourned. Thanks for your help and your participation.
Thank you,
Whoever's
everyone.
dog that was. Bye.
Good night.